Sobia had always believed her life would unfold like the Bollywood movies she adored. At 23, she still dreamed of grand gestures, secret glances, and a love that made the world shimmer. But reality was less glamorous. Born into a middle class Muslim family in Karachi, she was the youngest of four sisters and the last to remain unmarried. Her parents, who doted on her, saw her as their baby, their gentle hearted girl who never raised her voice and never complained. She was a little chubby, a fact that never escaped her own gaze in the mirror. Though men often noticed her kindness before her figure, she'd never had a boyfriend. Only an endless list of celebrity crushes to keep her romantic imagination alive. When her aunt arrived from Australia for Eid, Sobia was so excited to meet her Khala after 5 years. After spending the whole morning chit-chatting with her aunt, Sobia went to cook lunch for the family. That afternoon, Sobia's mother pulled her into the living room, her voice trembling with excitement. "Your Khala has brought you a proposal," she whispered. "It's for you and Waleed." Sobia's mother was happy to let her youngest beloved daughter to be closer to her than ever by getting her married to her own sister's son. Even though people do look at it with taboo at times, some Muslims do prefer getting married to their cousins for the same reason. Sobia's heart lurched. Waleed? The cousin she hadn't seen since she was 2? Back then, he'd been a tall boy of 9, all elbows and shy smiles. She remembered calling him Waleed Bhaiya. The thought of marrying him now felt strange, almost comical. But her family's joy was infectious. Her mother's eyes shone at the idea of Sobia moving to Australia, staying close to her sister. Even Sobia's father, usually so reserved, looked relieved. A good family, a known family. Sobia tried to smile, tried to picture herself as Waleed's bride instead of his little cousin from long ago. And she prayed, silently, that the man she had never known would somehow become the love she'd always wished for. Waleed had grown up thousands of miles away in Melbourne, a world that seemed impossibly different from Sobia's. His life had not been without turbulence. For over 10 years, he'd been in love with Ellie, his college sweetheart. He had imagined a future with her, a home, children, a life built on the shared language of affection. But neither family had ever accepted their relationship. The cultural and religious chasm proved too vast to bridge. In the end, the dream had splintered under pressure. Even as he agreed to the proposal with Sobia, more out of resignation than hope, he couldn't pretend Ellie was gone from his heart. When Sobia's family arrived in Melbourne for his younger sister Ramin's wedding, the past and future collided. He saw her for the first time in almost 20 years, a shy young woman with downcast eyes and a polite smile, her hands folded in front of her like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. They exchanged only tentative glances during the days of wedding preparations. The house was full of laughter and movement, but between them lay an unspoken tension neither could breach. On the night of the wedding, as Ramin walked down the aisle in glittering bridal finery, Sobia followed behind her, radiant in pale gold. Guests whispered among themselves. Sobia looked breathtaking, but Waleed's gaze was a storm of conflicting emotions. Guilt, resignation, and something he refused to name. He never imagined the night would end with the new promise he was unprepared to make. The wedding party was in full swing when Waleed's mother rose to her feet, her voice steady but brimming with emotion. "Today is such a blessed day," she said, her eyes glistening as she looked from Ramin to Waleed and Sobia. "And I can think of no better moment to celebrate another union." A hush fell over the hall. "Tonight," she continued, "we will also announce the engagement of Waleed and Sobia." Gasps rippled across the room. Sobia froze, her breath caught in her throat. Waleed looked as if someone had struck him. He was angry, frustrated, yet helpless as he watches everyone clap with joy looking at them, and the sight of his mother's hopeful face left him powerless. That evening, under chandeliers and watchful eyes, they exchanged rings neither had prepared to give. Sobia's hands trembled as Waleed slid the band onto her finger. Waleed and Sobia were engaged. But just a week later, everything changed again. Waleed's mother collapsed from a sudden heartache, a cardiac arrest that took her on the journey of no recovery. She passed away that morning. The funeral was a haze of sorrow. Waleed's father wept openly. Ramin clung to Sobia as if she were the only solid thing left. In the quiet after the burial, Waleed found a letter tucked in his mother's bedside drawer. The date was the morning after their engagement. My dearest Waleed, thank you for doing this. I know how hard it was for you to let go, but I am so grateful that you agreed to move forward. Sobia will bring peace to your life. She will be your family, your happiness. Take care of her as you would take care of me.
He read the letter twice, the words tearing through him. He loved Ellie. He always would. But he could not deny his mother her final wish. A month later, he married Sobia. On the night of the wedding, Sobia was very nervous and shy, as this was her first time ever being in a space so close to Waleed all alone. She waited in the room, nerves and longing tangled in her chest. Waleed entered the room and immediately started changing into his pajamas, indicating he's ready for sleep. Upon realizing the disconnect and awkward silence, Sobia walked towards her luggages, trying to look for something to change into. But with the nails and bangles, it was getting hard for her to unlock the luggage. When Waleed saw her struggling, he came forward and helped her. There was intense tension between them, but ignoring it all, Waleed asks Sobia to get changed and be back as he wants to talk to her about something important. After she returned from the bathroom, they sat on opposite edges of the bed. The silence was suffocating. I have to tell you something, he said at last, his voice low and tight. I love someone. Her name's Ellie. I have loved her for years, and I don't think that will ever change. Her throat closed. This marriage, it's for my mother. I'll provide for you, I'll respect you, but I can't be a husband to you. Not truly. He said he's gonna see Sobia as someone he shares his room with, not his life. Sobia closed her eyes, willing her tears not to fall. Heartbroken by the only person she expected love, care, and affection from, it broke her completely. But Sobia doesn't let Waleed see that. She smiles and nods, agreeing to Waleed's will. She says she won't come between two people who love each other. I won't expect anything, she whispered. If you want to end this, Sobia gets cut mid-sentence. No, he said quickly. My mother asked me to look after you. I won't. I can't leave you. But please, don't expect love from me. And so they lay down in silence, two strangers bound by duty. Outside, the city was hushed. In the darkness, Sobia let herself cry, careful not to let the sound reach him. The mornings in Melbourne were different from anything Sobia had known. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of eucalyptus and the salt of the sea. Some mornings she woke up disoriented, expecting to hear her mother calling from the kitchen or her sisters bickering over tea. Instead, there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the faraway rush of traffic outside. It had been nearly 4 months since their wedding, 4 months since that night when Waleed had spoken words that had left a hollow ache in her chest. She remembered how cold the sheets felt between them, how she had pressed her palm against her lips to keep the sobs silent. He had kept his word. He treated her with courteous distance, never unkind, but never warm either. They existed side by side, Sobia occupying the spaces he left behind. The kitchen became her sanctuary. She cooked meals she knew his mother used to make: aloo gosht, chicken korma, steaming pots of masoor dal. His father, a gentle, soft-spoken man still lost in grief, often praised her cooking, thanking her with eyes that brimmed too easily. "Beta, you've brought life back into this house," he said one evening when she served dinner. She smiled, trying not to let the weight of that compliment sink too heavily, because she hadn't brought life for herself. Not yet. Waleed, when he came home late from the car dealership, would sometimes linger in the doorway, watching her set the table. His gaze would soften, as if he were about to say something he'd rehearsed 100 times. But then he'd just clear his throat, mutter a quiet "thank you," and disappear to his side of the house. Sobia wondered if he ever thought about her when he lay awake at night, if he wondered what she felt, but she never asked. He did wonder, though, at times. He'd wonder how unfair he is being to her. She could have gotten married to a loving, doting husband if it wasn't him. She could have had a better life. But there she was, a woman married for almost 4 months and yet not even touched by her husband.
One evening, as August rain tapped against the windows, Waleed came home earlier than usual. Sobia was in the living room, carefully arranging fresh marigolds into a vase, her wrist jingling with bangles her mother had sent from Pakistan. She looked up in surprise when he entered. "You're home early," she said, her voice tentative. He ran a hand through his damp hair. "Yeah, the dealership closed up early. The weather's awful." She nodded, unsure what else to say. The air between them felt charged, like something unsaid hovered just past their tongues. Waleed cleared his throat. "Listen, Ramin called. She and Adil want to invite us over for dinner this weekend." "Oh." Sobia set down the flowers, brushing petals from her palms. "That would be nice. It's been long since we saw them." "Yeah." He hesitated. She asked how you were settling in." Sobia forced a small smile. "You can tell her I'm fine." He looked at her then, and she saw the faint flicker of guilt that never seemed to leave his eyes. She wondered if he felt it every time he looked at her, a woman he had married out of duty rather than choice. They fell into a silence that was almost comfortable in its familiarity. But something about the rain, the early hour, the way he was standing so uncertainly in front of her, it made her feel braver than she had in months. "Waleed," she said softly, "do you ever regret it?" His brow furrowed. "Regret what?" "This. Us. Everything." He drew a slow breath, glancing away. "Sobia, it's okay," she interrupted, her heart thudding. "You can be honest with me." His jaw tightened. "I don't know what you want me to say. Just the truth," he exhaled. "I don't regret marrying you. I regret that it had to be like this, that you were pulled into my unfinished mess." The confession hung between them. Sobia felt something inside her soften, even as something else cracked. "Thank you," she whispered. He looked puzzled. "For what?" "For saying that." That night, she laid awake long after he had turned off his bedside lamp. The rain eased, replaced by the quiet hush of a city falling asleep. She turned on her side, watching the faint outline of him in the dark. For the first time, she felt that perhaps they were both prisoners of their own hearts, unable to unlock the doors they'd shut long before. Saturday came sooner than she expected. Ramin's townhouse was bright with laughter, filled with the smell of fresh biryani and cardamom tea. Ramin enveloped her in a hug the moment they arrived. "Oh, I missed you," she exclaimed. "You look beautiful, Sobia." Sobia smiled shyly, feeling the familiar pang of gratitude for Ramin's easy affection. She glanced at Waleed, who was already deep in conversation with Adil, as if trying to avoid any attention on them. Later, when the men drifted to the patio with their tea, Ramin pulled her into the kitchen. "Tell me honestly, how are you?" Ramin asked, her voice low. Sobia hesitated. She had mastered the art of smiling through her loneliness, but Ramin's eyes were kind, unjudging. "I'm managing," she said finally. Ramin touched her arm gently. "He's still stuck on Ellie, isn't he?" Sobia swallowed. "It's complicated. You deserve better, you know." A lump formed in her throat. She looked down at her hands. "Maybe, but this is my life now." Ramin didn't argue, only squeezed her hand. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me." That evening, as they drove home, Sobia looked out the window at the passing city lights. For a fleeting moment, she imagined herself somewhere else, another life, another love story. But when she turned to Waleed, she knew that this was her reality, and she would have to find her place within it. 2 weeks later, a storm hit Melbourne with unseasonable force. The wind howled against the windows, rattling the panes. Sobia was in the kitchen when the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. She felt her way to the hallway, heart thudding. "Waleed?" she called out. "Here." His voice came from the living room. She found him by the window, phone flashlight casting a pale circle of light. "The transformer must be out," he said. "Should we light candles?" "Yeah, I'll help." They moved around the house together, gathering candles and matches. In the flickering light, their shadows danced across the walls. It felt strangely intimate, like they were the only two people left in the world. When they returned to the living room, she caught him watching her. His expression was unreadable. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yeah, just remembering when my mother used to light candles during storms. She'd make us sit in the living room and tell stories." Sobia swallowed. "She loved you very much." He looked away. "I know." There was a long pause. Then, before she could stop herself, she said the words that had been pressing against her ribs for months. "I'm not her, Waleed. I can't replace what you lost. And I don't expect you to love me the way you loved Ellie. But I am here. I am still here. If not your partner, at least as your friend." His gaze met hers, something wounded in his eyes. He looked like he wanted to speak, but no words came. Instead, he nodded slowly. And in that small, silent agreement, something shifted. Things were different after that night. Neither of them could say exactly when the shift had begun. But there it was, a tentative friendship blooming between them. Waleed and Sobia had started to talk, really talk. Late at night, over cups of chai, they shared stories about their favorite TV hosts, the teachers who terrified them in school, the little heartbreaks that had shaped them long before they'd met. Sobia found herself laughing more easily than she expected. Waleed, though still distant in ways she tried not to name, was kinder than she'd imagined. In those moments, she could almost pretend they were ordinary newlyweds, learning each other's edges. Almost. One evening, Waleed stepped into the shower while Sobia tidied the living room. She heard his phone ring on the side table and instinctively picked it up, calling out over the rush of water. "You're getting a call," she said, knocking gently on the bathroom door. "Who is it?" he asked, voice muffled. "It's Ellie." There was a pause, the water still thundering behind the door. Then she heard it turn off. Waleed emerged, hair dripping, towel knotted around his waist. He looked at her, at the phone in her hand, and something flickered across his face. Guilt, or maybe shame. She smiled as though none of it mattered and held the phone out to him. "Here." He took it without meeting her eyes, stepping aside to answer. Sobia walked to the kitchen slowly, pressing her palm to her chest. That night at dinner, he barely touched his plate. After a long silence, he cleared his throat. "Don't cook for me tomorrow," he said. "Lunch or dinner?" She looked up. "I'm meeting Ellie, downtown. She wants to talk." Sobia nodded. Her voice was so calm, it startled even her. "All right." She stood and carried her plate to the sink. As she passed the fridge, her eyes fell on the old grocery list her aunt had written in her careful hand. Mutton for aloo gosht for Waleed. She had planned to cook it that weekend, thinking it might make him feel a little more at home. She'd even bought the fresh mutton that morning. But he wouldn't be there. He would be with Ellie. The next day, Waleed left early. He looked almost boyish in his anticipation, his eyes bright in a way she hadn't seen before. "Don't wait up if it's late," he said over his shoulder. "Don't worry," she replied, her voice as even as she could make it. The meeting was nothing like he'd expected. Ellie looked tired, her smile brittle. She said she'd spent months trying to let go, months convincing herself that someday, somehow, he would choose her fully. But seeing photos, Ramin's endless posts about how good he and Sobia looked together, had broken something in her. "I don't want this anymore," she said quietly. Waleed felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. "You know there's nothing between us," he insisted. "I told you the day after I married her. She knows about you. She's okay with it. She's not like other girls," Ellie interrupted, her voice sharp. "So what is she, Waleed? Special?" He stared at her. "That's not what I meant. I can't do this," she said, standing abruptly. "I can't keep watching you try to ride two boats to the same shore. I want a life. I want a husband. I want to get married." She paused, her eyes brimming. "I'm sorry." And before he could find any words at all, she walked out. He came home drunk that night. The smell of whiskey hit Sobia before she even saw him stumble down the hallway, shoulder colliding with the wall. "Are you okay?" she called, hurrying over. Waleed didn't look up. "She wants to move on," he slurred. "She wants to date other men. He fell to his knees, his shoulders shaking as he sobbed into his hands. Sobia's heart twisted. She knelt beside him, trying to steady his swaying frame. His arms came around her clumsily, crushing her against his chest as he cried like a child who had lost everything. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Let's get you to bed, okay? We'll figure something out. I'll talk to Ellie if it helps." Even in his stupor, he pulled back, looking at her with unfocused eyes. You do that?" She nodded. "Come on," she murmured, helping him stand. When they finally reached the bed, he sank onto it heavily. For a moment, he just stared up at her, bewildered. How could she be this way? How could any wife be this way, willing to help her husband win back the woman he loved? But that was Sobia. She indeed was special. Sobia gently guided Waleed to lie down. She tugged off his shoes, set them aside, and pulled the blanket up over him. Try to go to sleep, okay? She murmured, her voice low and tender. We'll get you changed in the morning. Just rest now. The softness in her words made something raw inside him loosen. He watched her move around the bed, slipping under the covers on the other side. Even in the dim room, he could see the worry etched across her face. She cared. She cared about him in a way he hadn't expected or deserved. And for the first time in a long while, the weight in his chest felt a little lighter. Was this love? Or something else? Some deeper kindness he didn't have a name for? He didn't know. But he did know that having Sobia there, lying beside him on a night like this, felt like being home. Moonlight spilled through the curtains, catching the brown in her eyes, the soft pink of her mouth. He felt an ache in his chest, sudden and sharp, an ache to touch her, to hold her, to be close. Before he could talk himself out of it, he reached for her. His hand brushed the hair from her face. She went very still, lips parting just slightly. Waleed leaned in and pressed his mouth to hers, tentative at first, then with a hungry, searching heat that startled them both. Sobia froze, her pulse hammering. His kiss was gentle, almost reverent, and for a heartbeat she let herself feel it. The thing she'd never admitted she wanted, to be held, to be wanted, even if it wasn't real. But she knew better. He was drunk, he was heartbroken, he didn't love her. Carefully, she eased her face away, her hand coming to rest over his heart. "You're drunk, Waleed," she whispered, her voice catching. "You're not thinking straight. I'll just stroke your hair. Let's go to sleep, okay?" He closed his eyes, breathing ragged, and she combed her fingers gently through his hair until the tension eased from his body. They fell asleep that way, wrapped around each other in a tangle of confusion and something perilously close to tenderness. When Waleed woke the next morning, his head throbbed in time with his heartbeat. He blinked blearily, trying to piece together where he was, what time it was. Then he saw the glass of water on the nightstand and the small jar of Panadol set neatly beside it. Of course, Sobia. He swallowed the medicine gratefully and stumbled to the bathroom for a cold shower, hoping it might wash the muddle out of his head. It didn't. As he toweled off, memories from the night before crowded in, her mouth under his, her small hand against his cheek, the hush in the room when he'd kissed her. It was all he could think about. When he came downstairs, the house was silent. No sign of his father or Sobia. He moved to the living room and stared out into the garden, trying to shake the feeling that something in him had changed forever. The front door clicked open. Sobia stepped inside, her hair pulled into a loose braid, the faintest trace of tiredness on her face. She looked surprised to see him awake. "You're up already," she said softly. "How are you feeling?" "I'm okay," he lied. "Let me make you breakfast." She washed her hands and disappeared into the kitchen. Waleed watched her in the pale morning light, rolling out dough on the counter. Every so often, she tried to tuck her bangs behind her ear with the side of her wrist, flour smudging across her cheek. He didn't think, he just moved. Crossing the kitchen, he reached out and gently brushed her hair back, tucking it behind her ear with careful fingers. Sobia stilled, her eyes lifting to his. For a moment, the kitchen was very quiet. The memory of his mouth on hers hung between them, fragile as glass. Her gaze broke away first. Will you pour some coffee? She asked, her voice low. The silence lasted through most of breakfast. It might have stayed that way if she hadn't spoken, her words careful, as if she were afraid they'd cut too deep. Waleed, she said finally, let me know if you want me to talk to Ellie, and when you want me to. I can't even imagine what it must be for her. Watching the love of her life get married to someone else. It must be so hard for her. He looked at her, struck dumb. How could she be thinking about Ellie's feelings? About his feelings? About everyone except her own? What about her? What about the girl who had signed away her heart to a man who barely saw her? For the first time, Waleed wondered if maybe the saddest person in the story wasn't Ellie at all. The week passed in a haze that Waleed couldn't seem to shake off. No matter how hard he tried to untangle the knots in his mind, everything just got messier. At work, the clients and their endless questionnaires that usually energized him felt grating. He'd built this business, his own dream, but not today. Today, he just wanted to disappear into something simpler. Scrolling through Instagram between meetings, his thumb stilled when Ellie's name appeared. Her latest post had gone up only minutes earlier. The first photo was her, hair pinned back, smiling at a restaurant table. The second, an artfully captured dessert, 2 spoons resting side by side. And then the third, Nathan. Waleed stared at it, at Nathan's easy grin, at the caption, to the sweetest evening, #good times. Nathan. He'd known, in that unspoken way men know, that Nathan had always wanted Ellie. He'd just never tried because she'd been Waleed's. He hadn't even realized they'd stayed in touch after graduation. He hadn't expected to feel this kind of hollow. When he finally got home, bone-tired and head buzzing with 100 anxious thoughts, he stepped inside and froze. The smell, warm, earthy spices, a hint of ginger, the rich, savory aroma of mutton slowly simmering. His heart gave a strange, small lurch. Are you making mutton aloo gosht? He called, poking his head into the kitchen. Sobia looked up, startled, then broke into the brightest smile he'd seen all week. How did you know? The aroma, he said, almost sheepish. It smells like Ammi's recipe. Her eyes softened. It is, she said, voice warm with pride. It's our grandma's recipe. My mom makes it the very same way. It's kind of a family treasure. He smiled, really smiled, as he went up to his room to change. Somewhere between the front door and the stairs, the weight in his chest had lightened. Was it the mutton, or was it Sobia? He didn't let himself answer that. The doorbell rang, loud and urgent, pulling him from the thought. Ramin's voice carried through the hallway before she even stepped in. Is that Ami's mutton aloo gosht? Dinner was a blur of laughter and teasing. Adil declared Sobia a Michelin star chef. Ramin insisted they should all move in just to eat her cooking. But for Waleed, every bite brought back memories he hadn't let himself revisit in years. His mother humming as she stirred the pot, setting aside the best pieces for him. Her hands always warm when she'd tousle his hair and call him beta. What would she have said if she could see him now? When the plates were finally cleared and Ramin and Adil drove off waving, Waleed and Sobia stood outside in the cool night air, staring after their car lights disappearing into the dark. Do you want to go for a night stroll? He asked before he could overthink it. Sobia turned to him, her face still soft with the glow of the evening. Yes, please, she said. They walked in the quiet, following the trail that led to the open garden at the edge of their neighborhood. They talked about nothing and everything. Eventually, he found himself telling her about Ellie and Nathan. The words stumbled out because he needed to say them to someone who would listen. Are you sure they're dating? Sobia asked gently. What if they're just friends? It didn't feel like it, he admitted. She didn't push further. They reached a bench and sat side by side. A young couple passed by with a stroller. Inside, a round-cheeked baby gurgled and clutched a stuffed giraffe. Sobia's whole face lit up. Oh my God, she whispered, leaning forward. You cute little thing. Waleed watched her, something aching and tender stirring in him. Do you want a baby someday? He asked quietly. Her smile widened, then faltered. Of course, she said, her voice soft as she looked away. I love babies. She didn't finish the thought. She didn't have to. Let's get home, Waleed, she murmured, rising before he could see her face too clearly. He followed in silence. For one blinding instant, he realized how many of her dreams she quietly set aside, how many she didn't even dare to dream, only because of him. That night, as she prepared their bed, she chatted in that bright, gentle way she did when she didn't want to burden anyone with sadness. I sent the picture of the mutton aloo gosht to my mom, she said, smoothing the comforter. She was saying she misses it. He looked at her, that dull ache back in his chest. Do you want to go meet Khala? He asked suddenly. The tickets are so expensive this season, she said, smiling that small, sad smile he was beginning to recognize. We'll go during off-season. But that night, after she turned off the light and lay down beside him, he pulled out his phone. 2 weeks later, when she checked her email, she gasped so loudly he heard her from the next room. We're going to Karachi? She squeaked, her eyes wide as she rushed to him. Yes, we are, Waleed said, laughing at her expression. Sobia threw her arms around his shoulders, her happiness warm and uncomplicated against his chest. And for a fleeting moment, Waleed wondered why he'd ever thought he was alone. The days leading up to their trip passed in an unexpected current of quiet anticipation. Sobia was a whirl of lists and planning. She called her mother twice a day, arranging everything she'd bring, everything she'd cook, everything she wanted to do when she got home. Waleed watched her, a little amazed at how someone's joy could fill an entire house. He hadn't realized how long it had been since their walls had held this much life. On the morning of their flight, Sobia was awake before dawn. She moved around the bedroom, her hair pinned back messily, folding clothes with precise care. You don't need to pack so much, Waleed mumbled from the bed, rubbing his eyes. I'm not leaving anything behind, she declared, half laughing as she zipped the last bag. My mother will ask me why I didn't bring my yellow suit or why I forgot her spices. Better to be prepared. The taxi ride to the airport was quiet. Waleed leaned against the window, watching the city crawl awake in the early light. Sobia was texting her mother. Her face glowed in the dark car, that same hopeful smile never quite leaving her lips. Seeing her like this, so light, so certain, made something unspoken crack a little in his chest. He tried to imagine Ellie's face in this moment. Would she have looked like that for him? Would she have filled the car with laughter and warmth the same way? But no matter how hard he tried to picture it, he couldn't. He shook the thought away. The flight passed in a blur of announcements and plastic-wrapped meals. Sobia fell asleep against his shoulder, her hair tickling his jaw. She smelled of rose shampoo and cardamom. He didn't move. When they landed in Karachi, it was late afternoon. The air hit them like a thick, humid wave as they stepped outside, the sky already shading into burnt orange.
Sobia's mother was waiting.
She was smaller than he remembered, her hair streaked with more grey. But when she saw Sobia, she broke into a wide, tearful grin. My bacha, she whispered, clutching her daughter so tight Sobia's face disappeared in the folds of her dupatta. Waleed looked away, pretending to fuss with the luggage, but when Sobia's mother pulled him into the embrace, he felt something in his chest loosen. It was the first time in years someone had hugged him like that. Their first evening was spent in a rush of greetings, neighbors dropping by, cousins appearing at the door with mithai, Sobia's mother pressing food into everyone's hands before they could protest. Waleed let it all wash over him, the noise, the smells, the warmth. He hadn't known he'd missed this. People who insisted you have a second helping, who asked how you were and actually waited for the answer. Late at night, when the house had finally gone quiet, Waleed and Sobia sat on the little balcony outside her childhood room. It overlooked the narrow lane where children had been playing cricket all evening. Now the street was empty, only the stray dogs wandering between closed shops. Sobia wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, breathing in the scent of home. Thank you for this, she said softly. I didn't realize how much I needed to be here. He studied her profile, the way the moonlight turned her hair silver at the edges. I'm glad, he said. She turned to him, her expression open and unguarded. You don't have to pretend you know, she said after a moment. I know this isn't easy for you, being here, being with me. Waleed's throat felt dry. I'm not pretending, he said. She didn't argue. She just looked at him a moment longer, then dropped her gaze to her hands, folded in her lap. I don't want you to feel trapped, she whispered. If you ever, Sobia, she looked up again, startled by the firmness in his voice. Can we not talk about that right now? He said quietly. Just tonight. I don't want to think about anything else. Her eyes softened. She nodded. They sat like that, shoulder to shoulder, in the hush of Karachi night. Waleed didn't know what it was, this thing growing between them. It wasn't love, or maybe it was. He only knew that for the first time in months, he wasn't haunted by what he'd lost. He was only aware of what he had. And for now, that was enough. Waleed and Sobia decided to visit their grandma's grave in her village. It had been a while since they both had taken time to reflect on the past, and today seemed like the right moment. The weather was calm, with a gentle breeze sweeping across the lush fields surrounding the graveyard. The sunlight, soft and golden, painted the gravestones in a warm hue. They walked slowly, side by side, as Waleed's hand brushed against Sobia's. It felt comforting, like a silent understanding between them. The air was filled with the scent of earth and flowers, and the distant chirping of birds added to the tranquility of the place. Reaching the grave, they stood in silence for a while. Waleed placed a hand on the gravestone, his gaze fixed on the inscription. Sobia, standing beside him, could sense the weight of the moment in the air. This wasn't just about paying respects to his grandmother. It was a place where Waleed found solace, where memories of his childhood and the love his grandmother had given him were still very much alive. Grandma always said family comes first. Waleed murmured, his voice soft, almost as if speaking to her. She would have wanted to see us happy. Sobia nodded, placing a small bouquet of white lilies at the foot of the grave. She always treated me like her own daughter, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I miss her so much. There was a long pause as they both stood there, lost in their own thoughts, feeling the deep bond that connected them to the past and to each other. Waleed turned to Sobia, his expression a mixture of gratitude and longing. By the time they were back to the city, it was pouring heavily, a thunderstorm so wild Waleed had never experienced. The entire city was having a power cut, not knowing when the electricity would be back. As Sobia and her mum prepared dinner in the kitchen, the dim light of Waleed's phone paints an illumination on his face. He had posted a story dump on Instagram of his time in Karachi. He noticed that Ellie had seen his stories of him enjoying his time in Karachi with family. He went to her profile to see if she had posted anything. Waleed was shocked and angry to realize Ellie had blocked him, not just on Instagram, from every social media. He immediately visited Nathan's profile and found himself in sleaze. It was Ellie on Nathan's story. In his bedroom, holding a heart shaped plushie, wearing the same AC/DC t shirt Nathan had worn in at least two of his photos. The caption said, "Baby." It was over. Whatever was between Waleed and Ellie, she had moved on. And she seemed genuinely happy around Nathan. She deserved to be happy. So did Waleed. And most importantly, Sobia deserved to be happy. Post dinner, Waleed sat by the window of Sobia's bedroom, watching the sky turn darker than ever, with dark black clouds. Thunderstorm all around, getting louder and louder. Sobia walks into the room, holding candles, and places them gently on top of different cupboards, slowly lighting them all, while protecting the fire from the wild wind flowing through the room. "Enjoying the rain?" Sobia asked. "One can never truly enjoy rain without being outside in the rain, you know," Waleed answered, as he got up and grabbed Sobia and ran out in the open yard to let the rain touch their souls. Even in the dark, cloudy night, Waleed could see the drenched body of Sobia. The kameez she was wearing turned see-through, being stuck onto her body, giving him an unintended peek of her skin. They ran back to the room as it started raining, heavier than before, water dripping off of their clothes that wet the entire house on the way back. "Where did Mum put all the dry towels now?" Sobia murmurs to herself as she keeps opening one drawer after another, searching through the dim light of the candles. Waleed, standing right behind her, could not stop staring at her skin, peeking through her wet clothes. The more he thought of looking away, the more he wanted to keep looking at her. "It's always this goddamn weather," he tells himself, laughing in his mind. Sobia extended her hand to give him the towel, but he grabbed her closer to him along with it right away, his body against hers. He tightly wrapped his hands around her waist, groping her as she was his and had always belonged to him. He moved forward heftily. He wanted to have a taste of her sweet lips, the very taste that lingered since the first night he kissed her. After resisting for a few seconds, trying to pull away, Sobia got pulled back tighter. Sobia gave in to Waleed finally. She let him kiss her, aggressively and passionately. He wanted to touch her, love her, devour her with all the pleasure he had restricted her of. That night they made love. Their souls became one as their bodies molded into each other. They had finally become husband and wife. Hours later, they found themselves snugly cuddling each other. Waleed, leaving a somber kiss on Sobia's forehead, finally said what he always wanted to say to her. "I love you. I love you so much. I want you. I need you. I love you." Tears rolled down Sobia's cheeks. the very tears of joy. She had longed so much to hear these sweet words she thought she could never hear, not from him. Can you love me, Sobia? Waleed asked. I love you, Waleed. Always have and always will.